I think everyone's definition of financially independent is very different. If you grow up as poor as I did, it's never enough. There's never enough. And I've had to learn that there is enough.
Today's guest, Victor from Silicon Valley, an amazing story, very touching, I think also very inspiring. Went from living in a boys' home after his father was sentenced to a death row to taking a tech company public in Silicon Valley during the dot-com bubble, building his own companies to 8 figures, selling it. We have it all. Investments, how to build a company, and I think a lot of great lessons around how to live a happy life. Today at Meine erste Million, we do it in English this time because we have a special guest from Silicon Valley. I'm very excited, Victor, for you to join us. Maybe before we dive into it, right? Like, how have we met Victor? We met Victor last year through the entrepreneurship organization in Silicon Valley when we were there for a few weeks. And Victor, I got really excited when we met because you asked me very early on what was a life-turning event in your life, Dennis. And I was like, it was me going to high school in Silicon Valley. And then I very quickly learned that you had a similar experience, but going the other way, coming to Germany. And maybe that's a way we can get started. If you could share a little bit, you've had, I think, a very challenging upbringing. And maybe you could share a little bit about the circumstances and then also those early years, but then also, right, like what sparked you towards business, just to get started.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Dennis. It's a pleasure to be here, and in spite of the time difference. Yeah, so I live here in Silicon Valley. I didn't come here by chance. It found me, and I pursued this and had an amazing career for 25 years now. But things started off with rather auspicious conditions. As a child, I had a pretty rough childhood, as things go, and I believe I have a theory in life that we all go through adversity. It's just a matter of whether you've been through it or are going to go through it. At some point, you're going to encounter it, and I think one's ability to persevere, to overcome, and to be flexible, and as Warren Buffett would say in investing, stay alive and stay in the game is absolutely critical. If you want to start at the beginning, my childhood started off in a difficult place. I was put in the hospital a couple of times before the age of 5 by my father. It was pretty challenging. He was an alcoholic, and at the age of 6, my mother tried to divorce him and got a restraining order, and he came back and he murdered her in front of me. So it was a really I was 6 at the time, so I can't say that I remember a ton of it, but you can imagine the trauma and the adversity that a 6-year-old goes through when, after that, my father's family and my mother's family fought over us in court to see who would get custody and be able to take us. And you become this ward of the court, as it's called in the United States. And we were shuffled through a couple of foster homes before they finally awarded us to my aunt, my mother's sister. About the same time, my mother's other sister died in a plane crash with her husband. And so they left 3 kids. My mother left 3 kids, and my aunt had 4 kids. So we were brought into a family of 10 children. My uncle was a mechanic. He made $24,000 a year. So we grew up very, very poor. I didn't know what a steak was, or until I was about 16 years old and had my first one. And so at 15, I left home. Under weird circumstances. I was a great student, but I had irreconcilable differences with my aunt and uncle. They wanted certain things for me. They didn't believe I should even think about going to college or get some sort of a degree. The other 9 children in my family had not, and I had my own thoughts. And so I left home one day when I had a jack thrown at me and hit me in the leg, and I couldn't walk. And I went to my best friend's house. His dad happened to be the counselor of the school. Sid Long comes home one day while I'm living there and hands me a flyer and says, "Hey, would you like to be a Rotary exchange student?" And I didn't know what that was, but it sounded like a great way out. And long story short, I ended up in Germany with an amazing host family whose parents, my host brother spoke English, but my host parents did not, which was a good thing because for the first 4 months, I'm walking around the house. I should have invented Post-its because I was cutting up little things and taping them to every object in the house to learn German, Boden, Dach, Fenster, und alles, and it was just to try to learn the different words, and I hated not understanding what was going on. So fast forward, after about 4 months, my German was pretty decent, even though I hadn't had it before going. And it was, to your point earlier, it was the pivotal year in my life. It was when I was
Mhm.
introduced to a completely different culture, but also a different way of living, a different income level. I was picked up in a Mercedes 500 SEL, and we're whisked, at 200 miles an hour or whatever it was on the autobahn down from Amsterdam back down to northern Germany, and I had my first steak. I went to southern France on vacation. I had never owned a suit, but my host father took me to a department store and bought me my first suit so that I could go to church with them. And it was sort of an enlightenment. It was sort of this realization that there is something else in the world, that there is more to aspire for, and that I didn't need to stay in a little town where there was lots of drugs and lots of great things. Also, in hindsight, it was a great place, a small town to grow up, but that I needed to see the bigger world, and that
Mhm.
education was paramount in order to get out. And so, from there, fast forward, I went back. I graduated high school.
Mhm.
I got a whole bunch of scholarships and ended up with a scholarship to study economics, political science, and then study German as well, undergraduate,
Mhm.
and it ended up in, as you know, in St. Gallen with another scholarship studying my master's in international finance. So
Mhm.
that gives you a little bit of flavor of my life, but it started off very difficult. I was given some amazing
Mhm.
opportunities, and I often say if I have seen further, it's because I've stood on the shoulders of those who came before me, and I am super, super grateful to Sid Long, who he handed me that flyer and allowed me to live in my home. I'm super grateful to my aunt and uncle who took me in and helped raise me for those formative years and allowed me to be with my aunt and uncle. And I'm super grateful to my host father who inspired me as a businessman to, sort of take some risks and go and get an education. So.
Nice. Thanks for sharing. One of the things that you already mentioned was this appreciation for education. So that was something that also your host dad helped inspire, apart from just the business topic, or.
My host father inspired me mostly because he was a businessman, he was a banker, and he would come home and he would talk about the challenges that he had at work with me and with Stefan, his son. He would take me into work. One day I'll never forget. He took me into his work for the day, and we arrive, and this guy comes in about 15 minutes after we arrive, and my host father had gotten coffee, and he sits down and he proceeds to verbally relay what's going on from three different newspapers. This assistant had read three newspapers and was then explaining to my host father what was going on in the world so that he would understand macroeconomically, et cetera, what he needed to encounter and decide and do that day for this very large bank. And I was fascinated by the structure of it. I was fascinated by business. He tried to explain to me how banks made money and the various different people that worked for him, and he had thousands of people who worked for him. So he would have to travel around. And I thought I could do something like this. This looks fun. It looks interesting. The daily challenges, the people to help you, the team that you have, and the sort of the camaraderie. Everyone obviously worked for him, so they were always very, very nice to me as well. And so that probably made an influence on a 15-year-old. I felt important suddenly, and nobody had ever really paid attention to me. So yeah, that he did more of that. He also inspired me because he really started at the ground level. I don't think he was the janitor in the bank, but he started at the very, very bottom and he worked his way up for 30 years in this bank to get to the very top position. And that perseverance, that hard work, that determination, he came from nowhere and made his way without really a college education.
Mhm.
So yeah.
What I find especially fascinating, and I like Dennis, you have this too. I certainly have it. This sort of these pivotal moments, right? Like where something in your life that you do like influences everything thereafter, right? Like you mentioned, okay, for you going to Germany and essentially then getting the flyer and actually acting on it was extremely pivotal. I have a similar thing where my parents sort of goaded me into going to this boarding school that I really, really, really didn't want to go to, which really shaped my outlook on life and also my ambition level on life and what's possible and what's not and what I should be doing with my life. At some point, it was a very tenuous situation as to whether I continue going to be there or I actually get my parents to take me back. And I luckily didn't succeed in goading them to take me back home. But I keep thinking about this counterfactual. And I'm wondering, do you sometimes do that too? Like the Victor that didn't act on the flyer or that didn't get the flyer? What would that Victor be doing now?
It's a great question. I have pondered that quite a few times. Uh, you know, the part that I've left out, David, is that I've lost 3 of those siblings to drugs or alcohol.
Yeah.
A lot of adverse, you can call them accidents, but many are self-inflicted, have happened to our family as I was growing up. Things that maybe should not have happened. One of my sisters put her daughter in the car on one of her birthdays and was high on cocaine and alcohol and marijuana and whatever other cocktails that were in her blood and had a head-on collision with another couple, all dead on impact. I don't know if that would have happened to me. I believe that we're all given opportunities in our life. We're given those moments to choose. Not everyone makes the right choices, and we don't always make the hard choices when they are. God knows it wasn't easy. I had to apply for this program, write a bunch of essays, interview against about 8 other people who also wanted to go and be an exchange student before I was selected to go. Then, without any opportunity to learn the language of German, I had to start learning German before, and there was not much opportunity. I'm reading books. I'll never forget. I pick up the dictionary and I looked up one word, diligent, fleißig. And I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to have to be if I'm going to learn another language right now. And of course, I thought I was too late to learn another language because I was already 15, but it was a perfect time to learn a language. My mind was ready for it. Mm-hmm. I think when you're younger, there's a lot of options and a lot of options to take the wrong track and a lot of options to take the right tracks. And the right tracks are not always the easy ones. They're probably the ones that you're going to have to work the hardest on. But I think it's incumbent on and a product of many successful people that when that opportunity comes along, no matter how hard it is, and maybe ignorance is bliss, you don't know what you're getting into when you're pursuing it. But you grab hold of it with both hands and you pursue it. And sometimes I think maybe in your case, David, maybe our parents do know better on some level. Maybe they do have a plan. God knows I didn't appreciate my aunt and uncle until I was probably 30. And my sister asked me, hey, Victor, if something were to happen to my kids, would you take them? And it just so happens my aunt was 30 when she had to take me and my brother and sister and these 3 other kids into her family of 4 to make 10 of us. I couldn't imagine that at 30, because at 30, I didn't yet have my kids. They weren't born. And here I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I could have my sister's 2 kids and be raising them. I'm not ready for that. But if you're ready or not, sometimes you have no choice. And when you're young, you have you don't have many options. There's not many that come your way. And so when a good one comes, you grab hold of it and you do it. As you get older, I've found, especially when you hit about 35, 40, those options start coming in droves. You have 100 things that you have to say no to in order to leave room for that one really great thing. Otherwise, if you say yes to everything, something great's going to come along and it's going to pass you by because you won't have time for it or you won't recognize it. So
in German, there is this phrase, which I don't think there's a very good translation for it, is jemanden zu seinem Glück zwingen. Like to force someone to their happiness.
Yeah.
This is one of the core beliefs of my parents, that you need to force someone to be
Yeah.
happy sometimes.
You will be happy whether you like it or not. Something like that. I don't know. Interesting. I like that. I'll have to remember that one. I like German sayings. Like my host brother once taught me the saying "Leg mal ein Zahn zu," like hurry up. And I'm like, okay, and so I like to remember things like that. So thank you. He and I used to play with them a lot. We would make them up. Like I made one up that I would say to him all the time when he was messing with me or when I wanted to stop something like, and you will understand it because you speak English, but it's "Gib mir eine Bremse." In English, give me a break, which you would never say in German, of course, but we would make up stuff like that because we could. And he spoke English and I spoke German, and he had lived in America as well. So it was fun for us to do things like that. Of course, that's not one. So
one of my favorite sayings that I learned pretty much the first day. So I, as a 16-year-old, went to Palo Alto, right? So my mentor, Ken, or who became my mentor, he picked me up at the airport and he's like, Dennis, you Germans, you always have a plan and everything. Here, we figure it out. So he used this figuring it out so often. And he picked, basically, I thought I would stay with the host family. There was no host family yet. So I just stayed in the hotel, which was good, right? Like, I don't want to complain, but it was like, there was like nothing planned. And within a week, I suddenly had an internship. I mean, there was so much opportunity. And I learned, so I just figure it out, right? I can just go there and I figure it out. And that was something that I remember as one of the first English sentences that I learned. I mean, I spoke English before, but really this California mindset, we figure it out. I really love that.
Musst es einfach ausknobeln. Just kidding.
Okay, that's kind of a boomer saying. Ausknobeln.
That's definitely not part of everyday language of a 16-year-old back in the day, but that's accurate. So, Victor, I think one of the parts, right? Like, so we met through entrepreneurship organization. So, maybe just for people who don't know EO yet, it's an organization for entrepreneurs. So that means, Victor, you must have also started a business. Otherwise, you wouldn't be with EO. Maybe we want to talk a little bit about that and your journey there. I think if you want to share, I thought it was
absolutely
really,
thank you.
Interesting how you even got the idea. I think you were sort of taking a break from your sort of corporate life, if I recall correctly. Yeah. And then you were doing extreme sports and suddenly you launched into a big venture. So if you want to share.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed athletics, running, working out, and training, keeping my body physically. And not so much for my body or for my physique as for my brain. It allowed me to deal with challenges in my life, whether emotional or mental or intellectual or psychological. It allowed me to process things. Broke up with my first girlfriend, go for an 18-mile run to process it, have a challenge taking company public, go running at lunchtime just to think through things in my mind. And I took a much less traditional route to the entrepreneurship, and I'm wearing the hat. EO is Entrepreneurs Organization right here, because I am the current president of the Entrepreneurs Organization for the San Francisco chapter. I'm leading the chapter this year, and I'm having a blast trying to just give back and serve the chapter. But I took the less traditional route to entrepreneurship. Many people in America start their companies sort of on a whim, and then suddenly they're at $1 million. And I went to business school, as you know, in St. Gallen in Switzerland. I started with Price Waterhouse, went to the Genentechs, the Oracles of the world, and worked in the big, huge company, which gave me the advantage to learn processes and procedure, to learn how big companies do things before launching off. I launched off into Silicon Valley and ended up taking a company called Choreo public, which was one of the first SaaS companies. Actually was called an ASP, an application service provider. We hosted Oracle, PeopleSoft, Siebel, that type of thing. And then went to be CFO of a biotechnology company called Telic that we ended up doing a secondary for. So I had a lot of big company experience before finally saying, and one of the best things I've done in my life is in between jobs, in between opportunities that I had pursued, just taking some time. chance favors the mind that's prepared for it. Your mind can't be prepared. It's kind of like the book. I always quote the book, Repacking Your Bags, which is very small, very easy read. I highly recommend it. It's like 30 or 40 years old now, but it's like, if you want to buy a whole new wardrobe or a few new shirts, you often need to get rid of a couple shirts out of your closet, but you can take that to almost every aspect of your life. It's really hard to get a second wife if you're already married to one. It's really hard to, or girlfriend or whatever, to make room for that. And so one of the things that I've done in between jobs is just take the opportunity to take some time off. Instead of, hey, trying to find that next job while I'm in a job, I basically say, okay, I'm gonna take some time off. I tell myself mentally 6 months to a year, I'm just gonna do something else and see what else is out there. It's to what I was talking earlier, David, about opportunities. If you don't make room for the opportunities that might come along, if you're not ready for it when it comes, then you're not going to see those opportunities. Louis Pasteur, chance favors the mind that's prepared for it, right?
I mean, also necessitates sort of being open, but also having like an abundance mindset, right? Like for a lot of people, quitting a job without having another one lined up, especially like here in Europe, I think that is an absolute nightmare scenario.
Yes. And
das ist aber riskant.
Yeah.
Geht man jetzt ganz schön ins Risiko, ne? Also.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is scary as hell. It is so scary to do something like that. And one of the hardest lessons that I had to teach myself over time, growing up in a very, very poor family without a lot, was I had to transition from that scarcity mindset to that abundance mindset. And that took a lot of very conscious meditation and work for me to get to the point where I could do that. But at the same time, once you do, those opportunities seem to get bigger, and you're prepared for the ones that actually matter. And so, to your question, Dennis, yes, I decided to take a year off. I applied for this crazy show on television called Global Extremes Mount Everest Challenge. That was basically adventure racing. Because I was a runner in college, I was a triathlete after college. I had been doing double century, riding my bicycle 100 miles, 200 miles, that type of thing. And so I joined this thing, and they start off with 1,000 applicants. They narrowed it to 100. We would compete all over the United States and the world, and they narrowed it to 50, narrowed it to 24. Anyway, long story short, I basically was doing this crazy adventure racing when this opportunity came along, and I was literally running up some hill, probably on day 2 or day 3 of a race with no sleep. And we have lots of time they assign you always have four teammates. You have to stay within 100 yards of each other. And this guy starts telling me about his dad bought this company, and they have these patents to do this crazy technology to repair, concrete and sidewalk trip hazards and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, that sounds interesting. Would he sell me the rights to those, whatever, in California? And so anyway, 3 weeks later, I'm out in Utah meeting his dad and putting these patents together to start this company. And so from 0 employees to about 75 in 3 locations, I built a company. And when I left, I sold that company for 8 figures and walked away and to a VC and a foreign buyer. And it was an amazing opportunity that I had. I didn't think I'd do it for 12 years. I thought it'd be a 5 years, but when the cash flow is that good and it's that profitable and it's growing that quickly and you're having fun and things are going well, it worked out well. I wasn't super passionate about the particular industry. It's a lesson I learned while there. I don't recommend you going into something that that you're not super passionate about, because sometimes then you're just pursuing it for the dollar. But as a means to an end, it was a pretty amazing opportunity to be an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned something earlier, right? Like you IPO'd a company before, you did a secondary with a biotech company. So I hope it's okay if I ask an indiskrete Frage, as we say in German. Does that mean you were already financially independent before starting the business? Or was that really making a big change for you once you sold the company?
It's a great question, Dennis. I think everyone's definition of financially independent is very different. If you grow up as poor as I did, that number sometimes is a much larger number because it's never enough. There's never enough. And I've had to learn that there is enough. That is a transition that I've made, and I'm super grateful to have made in the last 10 years. I think many of us have more than we can imagine and or will ever need in our lives. And as long as you understand concepts of compounding and you can live frugally, and God knows I can live on nothing. I love, one of the things I often quote is Stoicism. The Stoics, whether it's Marcus Aurelius or whoever, they talk, there's various different exercises that you can do. And, I love the concept of just fasting for a day. You realize that you don't really need food all the time. I also knew what it was like to be hungry, so I already sort of had that concept. Or just wear the same t-shirt and the same pants for a couple of days. You're not going to die from it. And I've done it how many times while I'm out backpacking in the backcountry for 3 or 4 days. I have the same pair of pants. It's such a simple life. And the reality is you find somewhere along the way while you're in your travels that those are the happiest times of your lives. And yet you didn't have your Armani suit on or your Hugo Boss suit or whatever, you take your pick. You weren't necessarily eating foie gras and having the best meals. It maybe was just a baguette with some cheese, or whatever along the way. And you weren't watching something on TV or pursuing something that cost $1 million, but that sunset on the island of Crete overlooking whatever, it was the most insane thing. And it's just stuck in your mind. And so there are so many simple things that you can take from the Stoics exercises of, my favorite one is prospective retrospection. It's the concept of looking forward into the future 10 years to look back on yourself and realize you really are living the good old days right now. You're in the middle of them. And at any point in life, you can do that and realize life is pretty damn good. In 10 years, it's probably not going to be, it might be better. Hopefully it's better for you, but it's not always, and you're not going to have your youth and you're not going to have all the things that money doesn't matter. So I'm not sure how I got off on that tangent. I apologize, but
to end the question, you have enough. Yeah. Very good.
Yeah. So yes, I did. Again, it depends on your perspective. I have a house in Silicon Valley. I mean, there's many people in the U.S. who would kill for a house, absolutely. Much less in Silicon Valley. It's not the $1 million home that I imagined when I was a kid saying I was going to have $1 million home, because it's a 1,200 square foot Spanish style, but it's in Silicon Valley, so it's worth many more than that. But it's just that's what you get here. You don't get a mansion in Silicon Valley. You're happy because you have water on 3 sides. From my first IPO, I do enjoy sharing this because it's a product of the time. But if taking a company public, raising $180 million, and on the day you go public, you're worth $21 million on paper, your options, but this blackout period is 6 months for executives, and I was VP of finance, so I had this blackout period. So fast forward, we went public in June of 2000. Now you can do the math. The first crash of the .com, .bomb, whatever you want to call it, was in March. We went public in June and raised about $180 million. The second crash was in September. We were cash flow positive. We were profitable. We were doing great as a company. We had 400 plus customers who had signed 3 to 5 year deals for us to host their software for them. 250 of those went bankrupt within 3 to 6 months of our customers, which doesn't bode well for our company.
Doesn't matter if you're profitable if your customers aren't, right?
Exactly. If you don't have customers anymore. Our company survived because we had $180 million in cash. But one of the products of the time was that at one point we went from like $21, $22 a share in on the stock market all the way down to $2 a share. And if you did the calculation of $180 million divided by our shares, we were worth $3 a share in cash. So if we didn't have poison pills to prevent people from taking us over, or it wasn't the time when no one would have taken any company over because everyone was running for the hills and everything was going down, somebody could have bought us for $2 a share on the public markets and taken the $3 a share in cash and made 50% return. We ended up having to sell the company. IBM bought the company for pennies on the dollar. And that $21 million that I was very comfortable and was retired on, zero. I took zero away from that, except some amazing stories and a really good experience having taken a company public, which is fine. I mean, it's a quarter century ago now, but it was a good lesson to go through. Nothing's ever guaranteed in life.
But that must have fucking hurt at the time. No, no.
Yeah, it definitely hurts, but it's not something I ever had. I never had that cash. I did nothing wrong. I could not have cashed out. I couldn't get out of anything. I couldn't trade for 6 months. There's a blackout period, and it was during that 6 months that it went from a lot of money to nothing, zero. And you're watching this just evaporate in front of your eyes. You also have a stock portfolio at the time, because I've invested in stocks since I was, for 30, 35 years now. I enjoy that type of thing. I don't consider it gambling. I think you make informed decisions based on invest in great companies that are growing really, really fast. If you can read the financial statements and you listen to the earnings calls and you trust the management, and there's a bunch of factors that I take into consideration, I think that you can do extremely well, and anyone can become very, very wealthy just by making informed decisions and investing in great companies. You can't control macroeconomic conditions, exactly what's going on right now with tariffs and Trump and all that stuff. You can't control that. But if you're in great companies, and as, again, Warren Buffett said, you can hold on in the long term and survive, and you don't need that money out of the market in the short term, and you don't freak out and sell everything. Eventually it will come back around. And I believe that's the case in this particular situation right now as we sit and speak and watch the markets in turmoil, fluctuating. I had my portfolio fluctuated more than 16% the other day, like last Wednesday, when the tariff announcements were going. That's scary as hell. But I know they're great. They're 12 amazing, great companies. And I know that they're not going away tomorrow. And I think that they're going to drive the next industrial revolution of AI.
Vic, why not just indexing?
David, you should index. If you have that mentality and you don't want to do the research and the homework, then you should absolutely just index. I absolutely agree with you.
Okay.
The difference between indexing is that you're going to make 8 to 10% on average and that's fantastic. If compounding, if you understand it, you earn it. If you don't, then you pay it. And if you just put your money in and you are really good at something else, then you should do that. If you're like me and I like to research companies, I like to listen to the earnings call once a quarter of those companies and listen to the CEO and the CFO talk about the company and how and the growth trajectory and what it's doing. I like to read the news articles on it. I like to delve into the financials, all three financials, not just the one that most people know, the P&L, but the balance sheet and the cash flow, and understand how they work together and see where a company is going and see the investments they're making. And you really geek out on the technology of whether it's the digital transformation or artificial intelligence and inference and the next, sort of that next industrial revolution. I love that type of thing. And if you can find those companies that are profitable, that are also growing incredibly fast, and when I say incredibly fast, 20, 30, 40% per quarter for 12 quarters in a row. If you can find those, and then the thing I learned from that very first company, and probably the best lesson I took away that has made me many of those millions back that I lost in that IPO, that's simply the concepts of annual recurring revenue. Rather than investing in a product company that you have a shoe company like Nike that you sell 100 shoes this year, in order to do 20% growth next year, you have to start at zero and sell 120 shoes. In a company that sells software, has annual recurring revenue,
It's locked in.
You start at 100 and you just have to sell 20 more to have that 20%, and you're often going to sell more than that. That is investing in starting to invest in those type of companies 15 years ago, 20 years ago, because I can't claim we invented ARR, but we used a lot of those metrics within our company because that's the type of customer we had. We had 400 companies and we were doing the math on that. All we got to do is just get additional customers because those existing ones are going to stay. And so once you have those parameters within which to work and you can search out those types of companies, you're going to have some amazing growth, and then you'll do much better than indexes. if you don't have that desire or geek out on it, don't go.
Good pitch. Good pitch for active stock picking in growth stocks. Aber jetzt mal Butter bei die Fische. Actually, do you outperform the index over like the past 10 years?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
I'm inclined
by
to trust
by a long,
that is a very confident yes. I just buy it.
By a long shot.
So basically, Victor, right? I think one of the things that I notice you're very passionate about, and you've been writing about it on Digital Porcupine, which, by the way, I think is a difficult name for us Germans. It's one of these animals in the zoo. You'll have to tell us why it's named like this. But there, you're writing about financial education. I really loved how you said your kids knew the three financial statements from when they were 12 years old. I'd love to have a conversation with them today, right? I think they're like 18, 19, 20-ish, right? So they already have a lot of stocks that they could have looked at. But maybe we can like go a little bit deeper into that, because I noticed that was something I think that's important to you, and it's certainly something David and I learned a lot from David. I'm just doing indexes because he's the index guy, and I just learned from him. But I noticed this is something that I think you're passionate about.
Absolutely. In particular, I call it financial literacy. I think we in the United States, I know we in the United States do a very, very poor job of teaching our kids in high school, whether it's private schools or public schools, financial literacy. And that starts everywhere. It's the understanding of how credit card works, understanding of interest rates, understanding of compounding, the concepts of compounding, basic financial statements, understanding of how they work. And it's not just in high school. It continues on. There's many kids who go out and they get a degree in something and they don't take a single financial course in college. And then they start this great company and suddenly they come to me and I'm mentoring, or I'm sitting on the board, or I'm helping them out with their company. And I'm like, well, why are you doing this and this and this? And they're like, well, how do you even know that I'm doing that? I'm like, well, I was reading the financial statements, the balance sheet. What's all this debt? And what's all that? Like, they're like, I don't know how to read that thing. I let somebody else do that. And I think, how can you run a multi-million-dollar company and not understand that there's three financial statements and how they interact, and they tell a story of your company and whether it's doing well or whether it's in jeopardy, or how it's going to, translate and convert in the future. And so, I started quizzing my kids on the three financial statements and the three parts to each financial statement. If fast forward, yes, they're 19 and 21 now. One will graduate this year with a degree in design. But guess what she had to do during that degree in design? She had to take the 5 business courses. I said, I will pay for your education, which is far more than I ever had, because I had to pay for my own education and pay off loans afterward. I said, but you will take a marketing class, and you will take a finance class, and you will take an accounting class, and you will take an ethics class, and you will take and I wanted to make sure that they came out. And lo and behold, that marketing class clicked with her. And now she's interested in marketing, and she has the design background, and she may go back and get her MBA, and she may go into marketing, but who knows where she's going to be. My son just flat out chose to study finance and accounting and is studying that. So he doesn't have any other requirements, but I have been trying to encourage him to take like a psychology class, take a few other things, balance the world out and stuff. But I think the business part of it helps you in no matter what business you start, product or services, anything, understanding the business side of it, whether we like it or not. We all have to navigate a world which is based on, dollars and euros and whatever. And that is often the metric on which we measure our success. It is the metric on whether we consider ourselves financially independent and able to retire. It is how we pay for things. And if you don't understand the value of a dollar or the value of something, then you're at a distinct disadvantage.
I mean, sort of preaching to the choir here, right? But I get everything you say, I fully buy. However, I have a potentially controversial hypothesis. So the United States is the greatest consumer market in the history of mankind, right? There is no consumer market that's as big, where consumers are as happy to pay pretty high prices for stuff. It's fantastic. Like any consumer startup in Germany eventually knows, or in Europe, we need to get the US. If we want to become that truly world-changing company, we need to manage to get to the US. Because that's like just 10 times, 100 times bigger than everything that you can do in Europe, which is like absurd. Isn't sort of a prerequisite for the US consumer market being like that a lot of people are financially literate? Because they are so free spending, they are so very willing to have a 0% savings rate, to have all that credit card debt, to use buy now, pay later, and all of this stuff, which is financially insane, completely stupid. Isn't that a prerequisite for the US economy being so great?
Yes, I think it is on some level a prerequisite. I think I know there are many people who don't have $10,000 in savings in the bank, and yet they're driving a really nice car. They maybe are only renting a house and not owning it. And I see that quite frequently also within the entrepreneurs organization. These are people who have, at least by definition, a minimum of $1 million a year. Their businesses are bringing in $1 million a year, and yet they rent or lease their car. They don't own their house. They have virtually no assets outside of their company, and they are living sort of beyond their means. And if their company goes, and we are in jeopardy of that from COVID, we were in jeopardy of that. I watched quite a few companies go bankrupt because they were events companies or whatever. And we're in jeopardy of that again, potentially, for any company that's importing Chinese goods that we've just, 145%. It's like almost ridiculous. It's like, okay, it's like, that's not a disincentive. That's a shut the funnel off. My company is now dead. What does that person do who hasn't saved anything, who has no other assets, no diversification, who has also probably borrowed in order to get that company to that level? You can take that obviously to the next level on a personal level. You're absolutely right. We encourage people to get credit cards. There's many different cultural, historical reasons for this as well. Germany, and I don't know the whole story, but starting back in the 1920s, 100 years ago, and going through World War II, and then coming back, the concept of borrowing, most Germans, number one, don't invest in a stock.
No, Sparbuch.
Much less indexes. You're ahead of the game investing in indexes as far as the Germans that I know. I've preached that, hey, why don't you invest in a stock, to my host brother and to other individuals? And they're like, we don't invest in stocks. We put it in the bank. I'm like, yeah, but some of the banks have negative interest rates. You have to pay them to have the money in your bank. So that makes no sense either. But that is sort of there's a mentality of saving amongst Germans. And I can't really speak to other European cultures, but at least among Germans, very, very different from Americans. Many Americans just think that the government's somehow going to take care of them with Social Security and this and that, number one. Or, in the past, there was these pensions that many companies had. We don't have those anymore. Those have fallen by the wayside. Much of the infrastructure that we had call it 30, 40, 50 years ago, my parents, my grandparents, and so forth, no longer exist. And that transition hasn't quite happened. And borrowing is encouraged. Bankruptcy virtually doesn't exist in Germany, as far as I understand. I mean, I know they have it, but it's much harder to get a judge to agree with it. Here,
like private bankruptcy, you mean, right?
Private bankruptcy. Here, start a company, no worries. If it goes we'll just declare bankruptcy and continue on and start something else and get somebody else. I don't think it's healthy, and I think it's a big problem and can lead to. It's not unlike our own U.S. government. How many businesses do you know that can operate like our U.S. government does, where, what, a balanced budget? Why would we need to do that? Why do we need to be profitable? Why don't we just borrow another $1 trillion? That doesn't make any sense. I hope, although I shouldn't, but I hope that whatever they're trying to do right now in our government is going to make some kind of improvements. I don't agree with the way that they're going about it, but I agree that something was necessary. Something had to or will break. And so maybe they're breaking it on purpose, and that will help things down the road. I don't know. I think I'm as much in the dark on exactly what they're trying to do. And maybe they are in the dark too, but they just don't know it. As you guys over there, I have my friends who ask me, what the hell are they trying to do? Explain this to me, Victor. And I have studied political science and I have studied economics formally, and I'm trying to figure out what they're doing. And I can't give you the answer, but I don't want to make this a political call either. So
Yeah, David, you get into the weeds, right? We got into this initially with talking about financial literacy, right? And like, I noticed you haven't been writing lately, right? So is that something you're gonna pick up again, or like what's the deal with that?
Yeah, Dennis, thanks for bringing that up. I absolutely am. I've been ramping up and penning a few things recently. My son, as you pointed out, was 19. He was a incredible pole vaulter, and it was his last years at home in high school. And I had this incredible opportunity to volunteer on his team, to take him around to various different pole vaulting championships around the Western United States. He's now vaulting what's called D1, which is the very highest level in college. And I wanted to just be a part of his life and my daughter's life for the last 3 years. And I think that's one of the lessons that I took away from COVID. We never know how much time before something completely transitions. In the United States, I've at least learned recently, and I would, tell everyone, they say 90 to 95% of the time you will spend with your child is before the age of 18 when they graduate and go off to college. And then you don't have that anymore. And I love my kids and I have an amazing relationship with them, and I couldn't be happier. And I just didn't want to squander that time. I didn't want to miss out on that opportunity to spend the time with them. Yes, I'm now starting to write some new things, and I'm going to be picking that back up because they're both in college and I'm an empty nester, and I'm scrambling to try to figure out what is next in my life. And part of what's next for me is sort of giving back and promoting that financial literacy. And in particular, I want to start to try to figure out, how do I promote that in younger kids? It's one thing to take someone who's 30, is already maybe investing in a few companies or stocks or whatever, and share with them my portfolio, which I'm always happy to do, at least the names of the companies. It's a completely different story to try to mentor and educate and inspire 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-olds to help them understand the concepts of compounding and investing in stocks and maybe options if you want to get far more sophisticated, the concepts of puts and calls, and then take it to the next level, investing in real estate, making sure you have safe buckets so that you can survive the downturns, understanding the concepts of things don't ever go up and to the right. They kind of go up, and then they kind of go like this, and then they might drop down, and then they go up, and you need to be able to survive those difficult times. And so you have to have a sort of a safety bucket, which I've always done with real estate. So I have, real estate, you're holding it long term. It's less liquid, but it's a different asset in which to invest. And there's so many concepts of like, what's an asset, what's a liability, just understanding the piece of it. So I'd like to do that for 10 to 18-year-olds, so that they can start earlier than I did, so that they're not trying to figure it out the way I did between the ages of 18 and 30 before I could really kind of start investing and doing those things. And so hopefully they don't have to make all the same mistakes that I did.
But is there like a product or a service that you're offering at scale, or is this just sort of, or just, it's not the right word maybe, but is this just a passion of yours?
At the moment, it's a passion. I'm not trying to monetize anything. This is something that I've done frequently, just whether speaking or writing and so forth. It's a good question. I don't know yet where I take it from here. At the moment, I just want to get the information out there. I want to help children. I'm not. It's not a product that I'm trying to monetize in any way, shape, or form. That I don't get much satisfaction out of that anymore. I don't need to pursue it just for the dollar. I would rather just be able to inspire the next generation of investors and help those who may not be as fortunate. Look, a little bit about my history now. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I had nothing given to me. At 15, I was penniless, living not on the streets. I luckily had families that took me in, but I didn't have anything to start with. When I went to college, I got some scholarships, but I also worked 3 jobs while in college: security guard at the zoo, helping a 80-year-old woman edit her book, working in the microcomputer lab, working as a waiter in a restaurant, as a valet parker of cars. I did every job possible in college to pay my way through. So and I am now more or less have been, retired for the last 7 years. I do a lot of things on the side and have a lot of fun, but I do the things that I love and I'm passionate about. The Japanese don't have a word for retired. And I love that because I'm never going to be retired. I keep saying I've retired 3 times and it never takes. But what I like to do is help other people. I like to mentor businesses. I like to coach individuals who are trying to get sort of the next level, or who enjoy investing, or can't figure out why they have an issue within their company and need to grow it. Whether it's building a sales team, whether it's putting in values and into their company that give them a Northern Star, a compass by which to take their company to the next level. There's so many ways that I can give back. And I talk about in my, you brought up, Dennis, the commencement speech that I gave, but I talk about the 4 S's in life. And I've kind of added a 5th one, but you have to survive first. I survived. You have to stabilize. Well, thanks to a few great people, I was able to stabilize my life and get to a level of stabilization. And then if you're on this call or you're an entrepreneur's organization, you've already hit success, but you probably hit success even if you're just in your mid-30s and you have some savings and a house and stuff like that. And then, there's a self-actualization or awareness that has to come. That's sort of that in-between S after that success, because you can kind of keep that success thing going and then die only pursuing the almighty dollar or trying to get success. But that self-awareness and said that, hey, it's incumbent on all of us to give back to those who have helped us to get to where we're at. So that 5th S or 4th S, depending on perspective, is service or significance. I get an immense amount of value and satisfaction when I know that I've helped somebody else to achieve the next step, to maybe get to that success, or maybe I help them get from survival to stability, and then they can start working toward that, that 3rd S of success. And so, that's just a little bit of a framework that I stole from a dear friend of mine, and that I try to live by. So I'm in that service level, and I don't need to monetize this. If I can impact a few lives, and then I will. That will be enough for me.
One thing I really liked in that commencement speech, by the way, was I think you called it, you get to do something. So you get to, so every time I'm running and I'm running out of breath, not every time, but often, I did it this morning, I try to remember this, I get to do this, because I was listening to your commencement speech as I was running a year ago. And I really like this. Okay, I get to do this, even if it's shitty, even if it feels shitty right now. Yeah. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, I love it. It's one of the things that I preached to my kids when they were really young. They would complain. I started them very young, probably 6 and 8 years old. I would take them out on a 5K run on Sunday mornings, followed by whatever breakfast they wanted. I would either make them or we'd go out to breakfast somewhere. And of course, they would complain and they're like, "Why do we have to run?" And I would say, you don't have to run. You get to run because you have legs. And that concept can go in a million directions. But, we often say, why do I have to go to school? Well, you don't have to go to school. You get to go to school because many parts of the world, especially women, don't have the opportunity to get an education at all. And there are so many places you can apply that to. I have to go to work. No, you get to go to work. You have a job. You're not. One of my favorite quotes is how many Einsteins were never discovered because they died in a village in Africa of starvation before the age of 5, and how amazing and incredible could the world be if those Einsteins had been able to grow up and impact the world in the way that Einstein has, or in the way that some other incredible inventor or mind has impacted us and influenced us. And so how do we promote that? How do we help those individuals at those pivotal stages when they might not otherwise survive, or they might not stabilize? And if they don't stabilize, then they go on to do something horrific in the world instead of something great.
Yeah, I really like this picture of Einstein. I haven't thought about it this way, right? But it resonates with me simply because of this experience going to Silicon Valley, where I was like, this made a huge difference in my life. And we had a chance to help someone come here to Germany. And I was very grateful that we were able to help that person do that. I don't know what will come out of it. I hope something good, but that deeply resonates. So I really enjoy the conversation. I'd love to go on, maybe go a little bit deeper into the your EO engagement, but I also want to respect your time, obviously.
I do. I'm happy to chat again sometime if you'd like.
Yeah.
We didn't really delve into stocks and parameters in which to invest in them. We didn't talk about the Entrepreneurs Organization, which I'm in my 11th year, and I am absolutely super grateful to be able to serve as the president of the San Francisco chapter right now. I think anyone with a aspiring company, even if you're only couple $100,000, we have this accelerator program that you can join, which will literally then we will jump in and help you to get to $1 million. We will take you through a series of courses on people, on cash flow, and all these different aspects that you need to understand in order to bring your company to $1 million, and then graduate you into the Entrepreneurs Organization. I literally am coming off a high because I just got back from the Global Leadership Conference, which is an annual conference, and I've been to 6 of these. I've been to one in Frankfurt in Germany. I was in Singapore last year. This year it happened to be in Honolulu, Hawaii. And 1,600 entrepreneurs from all over the world, a bunch of fellow Germans I ran into there and got a chance to speak some German. People from Russia, people from countries in virtually every country were there, and it was just this huge inspiration to see all these people who have started their own companies, and they all have to be a 50% owner at minimum to be in Entrepreneurs Organization. So they have a similar mindset to you, and you're amongst your peers. You're amongst the people that that you want to be, and so that think similar to you. So it's an awesome organization. If you have a company out there and you happen to be listening to this, look for an Entrepreneurs Organization. 18,000 of them worldwide. So there's one in a city close to you. So go and find it. Yeah.
And that's also how we met, right? So because David and I are part of the Berlin chapter. So we traveled to Silicon Valley. David reached out. So that very much resonates. We haven't been doing it as long as you have. So we still have in front of us some of these leadership conferences, but we're going to Dubai, I think next month for sort of the moderator training. So I completely agree. Victor, thank you so much. I really love the energy. I was very much looking forward to this and really enjoyed the conversation. I made a bunch of notes. I'll have to follow up with a couple of books that you mentioned, or one specific book that you mentioned, the backpack book. So thank you so much. I really
thank you so much.
Enjoyed it. Love what you're doing. Thanks, Victor.
Yeah, Dennis, David, really great to see you both again. I wish it were in person. I hope we can make that happen one of these days soon. And obviously, come visit in America anytime. I'm 10 minutes from the airport. I would be great to grab lunch with you guys again. So
nice.
Thanks again.
Thank you.